Jesse, good afternoon. Welcome to the Medium Podcast.
Hey Jeff, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. You and we had a bit of a quick conversation about sort of how the week has been so far. Um, I know there's a new person probably joining you in terms of your girlfriend, but apart from that, how's work? How's life? How are you? I love the smile. What's been happening?
Yeah, thanks. Life's been good. This week's been a bit hectic. As
Mm,
we've kind of discussed, I started a new role at a new company recently. Tomorrow will be 4 weeks.
mm,
So yeah, from a sales perspective, this was the week of, getting my new account list, reaching out to those prospects. And, sometimes there's that stone cold silence, which, every sales rep gets reminded of again. So in that context, it's been a bit tough, but when things are a bit hard, it kind of reminds you of when you got to keep on pushing in a sense. But
mm.
yeah, personally, things have been good. Quite happy that it's nearly Friday tomorrow. But
Yeah.
I kind of say to my friends and my colleagues that it's almost we can't even complain how quick the weekends go because the weeks seem to be flying by even faster.
Mm.
So yeah, it's all in all, it's been good.
Fantastic. And had they guaranteed you commission for the first quarter since of your ramp up or?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm still waiting on a commission plan, but
Mm,
hopefully I can kind of chip in for Q4 2022 is the goal.
brilliant, brilliant. And obviously, a new job. Have you set yourself any sort of goals? Are you looking to sort of achieve something in the next couple of years? Or
Yeah, look, I mean, I still don't know 100% what the end goal is or
mm,
what it kind of looks like, but you're just enjoying the journey. I think, from a sales context, only really been doing it for the last about 3.5 years.
mm,
So, at this particular time, and as I told my current employer during the interview process was, I'm just interested in just developing my skills, kind of learning from people that have been at a company for a very long time. A lot of the people that I work with
mm.
currently are, it's upwards of, 6 to 11 to 22 years in one business. So I think there's some valuable things you can take away from there. But maybe more locally, as I said, want to close a couple of deals before the end of
Oh,
2020.
you better. I can see the bag hovering on top of your head.
Exactly, yeah. But more so just kind of familiarizing myself. The thing that's very interesting is I'm selling intent data at the moment, so it's a big value sell.
Mm,
And coming from the previous role that I was in, you were more selling, functionality and that sort of stuff. Whereas, really getting in the weeds with data, as we kind of spoke about it, I am dyslexic, so innately I struggle with numbers every now and again. But
mm,
one of the big key factors of taking this job was to kind of get out of that comfort zone that I had created for myself, and break through it a little bit, see what else is out there, and push. Just be uncomfortable again. I feel like personally, I grow a lot when I put myself in uncomfortable situations.
mm.
So very much in that space at the moment.
It's interesting when you mention dyslexia, of course. Do you sort of see it, don't get me wrong, Jesse, do you sort of see it sometimes affecting you, or is it very much something that you know of and it's more about how do you overcome it?
Yeah, look, I probably talk about this for hours, but I think it's
Mm,
my greatest advantage, Jeff. So, if I'm saying like it's front and present, I think the easiest way to explain to people, and just make it, very simple is, I guess what takes you 15 minutes to read, for instance, might take me 20 to 25 minutes.
oh, okay,
So
that's not too bad at all.
yeah, but as it kind of adds up after a while, it does
True,
get long and cumbersome.
true, true.
But yeah, as I said, so you know, I think from that and kind of dealing with it, there's a big resilience aspect to me. That it's one of the biggest attributes that I have, and there's some contexts where it's the best and the worst thing about me is like sometimes I just don't know when to give up or when
Yeah,
to
yeah.
actually just kind of chill out.
Okay, you know what?
Um,
I think I'll stop it now.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, look, as I said, I kind of look at it as the advantage that I've got over
Mm,
everybody. And it's just forged a different work ethic, a different way of thinking about things. Although there's a balance between working hard and working smart, I think I've had to really delve into both sides of those aspects.
interesting.
So yeah, I love it. It's as I said to you, one of the biggest things of why this was appealing in the way that you run this podcast is, we can just jump on here and have a chat. So,
Yeah,
I
there's
hope.
no financial arrangement, by the way, right? Or
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about that after. But yeah, I just hope that
mm,
if somebody out there one day comes across this, there's some synergies, and I've definitely had some dark days in that regard where it's sometimes hard to carry on doing the things that you're doing because it just feels like an absolute struggle. But yeah,
because of the dyslexia, Jesse, or was
yeah.
it a culmination, or primarily
No,
that?
yeah, exactly. I
Mm,
often think back to a time where I was in my second year of uni,
mm,
and had a bit of a chip on my shoulder in the sense that when I finished high school, I studied law. And the reason why I did that is essentially I just said to myself, through my whole life, I was pretty bad. I was very lucky that I had parents that were well invested in, trying to make me the best version of myself as possible.
mm.
But we sat in consultations with therapists and doctors, and I was never going to finish high school. I was that kid. So upon finishing
Wow.
high, yeah, yeah. So upon finishing high school, I just thought to myself that if I can go and study a law degree, which is obviously reading and
I know.
reading
I
and
was just about
writing
to say
based.
that. That's all words.
Yeah, yeah. My mentality is, if I could do that, I could do whatever I put my mind to.
Mm,
Hindsight's always a beautiful thing, and what I'm doing now, maybe I wish I studied business. But that 5 years and kind of where I was going with that story was, there was one day in my second year where, I just kind of gave up the one day. I was studying for a criminal law exam, which is like,
mm.
trying to memorize nearly 30 to 40 cases,
Oh,
as well
walk in the
as like
park.
yeah, exactly. As well as, legislation and all that stuff. And I still remember having a deep conversation with my mom where I was like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. It's killing me.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's a good example in my life of where you hit that boundary and you decide if you're going to push through it or if you're not going to push through it. And I think as I was saying earlier on, putting yourself and making yourself uncomfortable, at least for me personally, it's the best thing that I can do. So that whole 5 years of being uncomfortable, and there was definitely days I still remember one of my law lecturers pulled me in after a test and he was like, "Why are you doing this?" And I told that guy in that particular meeting, "I'll see you at graduation." So, it
Oh,
all kind of
I like
comes.
that confidence.
Yeah, it's sometimes you have to back yourself if nobody else is going to.
And what was the driver, Jesse? Like, by all means, were you trying to prove to yourself that you could do it? Was the motivation trying to go, you know what, screw you, my 5-year-old friend who can't to do this? What was sort of the driver to you wanting to do this?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff. I'd say in my younger years, I'm only 28 at the moment. Um, But when I was a lot younger, it was mainly proving people wrong. Which, as you kind of go on and as you learn things and you do get older and you spend a bit more time on the earth, you realize that you can't do things because of other people. You've ultimately got to do them for yourself. So, as I said, from my background, I'd say, from if we're just talking from an educational standpoint, no one's failed as much as I have. No one's probably struggled as much as I have
Mm,
in terms of like the day-to-day stuff. But it was always those people that said that I couldn't was the
sort
fuel.
of the
The
driver, yeah.
exactly, that was the fuel. But as I kind of got to the last couple of years, and there's definitely been people that said that I couldn't, but there's been more so people that I met along my journey, and I'm a big believer, and I love the idea of mentorship, and I
Mm.
think I'm very fortunate in my life that I've met a lot of really interesting and intriguing people that have helped me along the way. So there was definitely a shift of trying to prove people wrong and just doing it for myself because it's for me, it's not for anybody else. Those people when they go to bed, they're not thinking about if I'm going to finish my degree or
No,
if I'm
they
going to
couldn't
pass
care
this
less.
test. Exactly. And you're young and you're naive and you got a bit of an
Hey, but it
attitude.
worked.
Exactly, but I'd say the key to me is I started looking at all the people that have helped me along my journey,
Mm.
and they were the people that I wanted to prove right. So it moved from the proving people wrong to proving the people that believed in me
Very
right.
much the supporters in your life, eh?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. So getting back to that moment where you went to your mum, hey, mum, I can't do that. And you mentioned that either you give up or you keep going, right? What tilted you to go, you know what? I'm going to keep going. Was there some little catalyst? Was it like a little spark in your head that goes, I'm going to get it done?
Yeah, that particular day, I think it was, it was in 2014. I still kind of remember exactly where it was, the day, tears in
Mm,
my eyes, all that sort of stuff. But I looked at it and, my mom's always been a massive source of, or she's just always been there. She's always just been really valuable in those moments, but rarely stern when she needs to be. And she heard me out. And it's maybe a question we'll dive into a little bit later on about great pieces of advice that you've been given. But
mm,
she just told me, and I thought about it for the rest of the day. Like I just didn't even do anything. I went on a walk, and that was it. But she was just like, sometimes you got to stop and look back and see where you are at now and how far you'd come. And at that particular stage, I was 2.5 years in of a 5-year degree. Um, and she just said, personally, I think you would be more upset with yourself if you had to stop now, 2.5 years in, than if you had to keep on going. So there is times in life that I do believe that if it is getting intense, if it is getting difficult, sometimes you've got to just let go for a little bit, not forever
man, your
or
mum's fantastic.
yeah. So just that day, it was, I actually had to, for the first time in my life, actually just be like, okay, there's that stupid saying that if you have to judge a fish on how it climbs a tree, it will always think that it's useless, sort of thing. And, thinking back on that day, I just kind of looked, high school, 2 years in now, gotta keep going, just take a bit of a break today. And then literally the
Mm,
next day, woke up and just never looked
boom.
back after that.
Wow, that's amazing. And, you know, to share a bit more about dyslexia, it'd be great to sort of get a definition of what is dyslexia for the audience out there, and what actually causes it. Is it a sort of a root issue or whatnot? Or
Yeah, look, it definitely it comes in different forms, but I'd say it's mainly either numbers based or words and letters, for instance.
mm,
And unfortunately, I've got both ends of the spectrum. So, thinking about at the end of high school, everybody's like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant,
I had
or
no
or
idea, by
what.
the way. I thought I wanted to be prime minister, by the way, but
I
we'll
feel
see
like
how we go.
everybody,
We'll see
I
how we
feel
go.
like, yeah. But no, I kind of looked at it and I was like, I'm not good at numbers, I don't like blood, and all
Mm,
that sort of stuff. And um, so sorry, kind of to tie it back in there. So for myself, it's on both sides, but people can either struggle with the numbers side or the reading and writing side. From a genetic standpoint, at least in my own family, my
mm,
dad's dyslexic, so it skips a generation. So my dad's got a younger brother, so my dad has it, younger brother doesn't, my brother doesn't have it, but I have it. So it kind of goes in phases
wow.
type of thing, at least on my side. But I probably wish I had a better definition of it. But for me personally, there's still days where I'll type something in an email or in Word, and not even the computer knows what I'm trying to spell out. And there's even maybe times that I'm adding things up and it doesn't come right. So again, like maybe speaking to the work ethic a little bit, it's always just constantly having that time and energy to kind of check yourself, but also
And
just
like I
like
said, it adds up. Like I said,
yeah, so that's where I was
got
going
it,
with
got it.
that
Makes
side of
sense.
things. But that's more so for me. I think with other people, it is something that you can progress through definitely if you're fortunate like me, where you can go to the right people and they can help you out. But unfortunately, one of the saddest things and I think it was maybe a bit of a generational thing, is when people were dyslexic, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you were the naughty kid that didn't
Yeah,
concentrate in
you would have
class,
just sort
right?
of gone by and no one would have known.
Exactly, and those people, people in that kind of that sphere, they would have kind of grown up thinking that, yeah, maybe I am dumb or something like that. I'm not like everybody else, and
Mm.
I was really lucky. I went to a really good neurologist when I was younger that I used to work with. And, he used to just kind of tell me, he's like, Jesse, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, but everybody's brain goes that way, whereas yours goes the other way when you kind of think and process things about it. So, he's
Ah.
definitely one of the people that I'll always look to as, one of those people that I wanted to prove right. But I can't, as I said, it's the thing that I have on everybody else is that I look at things a bit differently, or I feel things a little bit
Mm.
differently to how everybody else kind of sees and processes things.
Interesting, Jesse. And do you sometimes carry that with you in life, or are you very much sort of going through life and just going, you know what, I have it, it is what it is,
Yeah.
BAU? Or does it
Yeah.
sometimes come up to you where you need to sort of either share it or it hits you? I suppose it does hit you sometimes if you were
Mm.
to write an email and all of a sudden you don't know, you got no idea what it is, right?
Yeah, exactly. Look, it
Ah.
is it is something that you're kind of on it's a day-to-day grind. It's very much a part of my
Mm.
life and who I am. And I would say that I make it I bring it up to people that I feel should know it. So obviously my employers and
Mm.
if we have to exchange a couple of texts every now and again, you'd probably see a couple of
Oh, mate,
spelling
it's
mistakes.
flawless, flawless.
Exactly. But yeah, in that context, it is something that I do try and make it aware in a professional setting. But from a personal side, and mate, I've definitely been at a table where, someone says the odd comment about it jokingly, and I laugh at those things because, I'm definitely not big enough that I can't look at the bright side or funny things that happen in that context. You can't really take things too seriously or literally
Good
all the
on you.
time. Otherwise,
Mm.
it
Yeah.
doesn't make you happy.
No, and it's very much shaped you in a very positive way.
Yeah.
I suppose you just need to find a pre-sales or solutions consultant who do all the work for you, right? And
Yeah, exactly. It used to be like that at my old job, but luckily, kind of going back to that, getting out of the shell and trying new things. And in this
yeah.
role, I'm very much doing the demo and the selling, which, from a
Mm.
sales context, I love that you control the whole sales cycle more so
Yeah.
than having to rely on too many other stakeholders. But yeah, it's just challenging yourself all the time, I guess.
And I know one of your responses was actually quite interesting. And does it then tie into the fact where you mentioned to me about the whole being average?
Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me a
Yeah.
bit more about that. Is it more in a sense that you need to accept yourself for what it is, or what is that? I'd love to elaborate here for me.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's as you just said, Jeff. I think a lot of, and as I get into my later 20s now, I think a lot of your like early 20s, maybe late teens, you're just so worried about, who you are as a person and what the world thinks about you. And, you're kind of going through these day-to-day struggles, or you're in
It's
a group
tough.
of, yeah,
It's
exactly. And
tough.
you sometimes you might be in a group of with a group of friends, a group of colleagues, and you worry about what you said or what these people are perceiving about you. And I was definitely that person.
Oh,
Probably
I think all of us have gone through the same scenarios.
100%. And I think, once you hit a certain age or you go through a certain amount of things in your life, you just realize that it's not really important, and it's more about, what you feel inside. So going back to my fear of being average, I always just thought, and as I said, being who I am, it's always armed me really well for being prepared for life, and I'd say struggle more so. Um,
Hmm.
and and in that regard, I've just always wanted to live up to my full potential. And I'm still unlocking that. As I said, I don't know what that looks like or what it is, but at this particular point in time, it's just being happy. It's being happy with who I am, what I'm
Hmm.
doing on a day-to-day basis. That's why I love the first conversation we had where you're a sales leader in yourself and you kind of pivoted completely to trying something that's a little bit more fulfilling in its own way for you. And I love that. So I think, you're a really good example of someone that's, you've had an exceptional career, but you're trying to not be average in like a podcasting sense. And, looking at how many podcasts you've done already, it's a phenomenal number. So for
Oh, I
me,
appreciate that, Jesse. Yeah.
so yeah, for me on a day-to-day basis, it's just, I was really lucky, I private school educated, went to the same I went to the same law school that Nelson Mandela went to. It was something that I also wanted to achieve. But I just knew inside me there was something that was, I don't want it to maybe be cocky or condescending, but that there was a greatness inside of me. And there was days where, you're sitting on the couch, or you just haven't had a productive day at work, and there's a mentality that was kind of built in me because of this fear of just grinding. And that kind of that ties into the immigration story that I have. And
Mm. I'm
I
seeing the dots. They're
yeah,
connecting.
we'll get there. But
Mm.
effectively, I grew up in South Africa. Obviously, I'm sure everybody's got their own perceptions, definitely heard stories of it. I'm not here to talk badly about the place, and it made me who I am today. But as I got to the end of my studies, I just realized that I'm not going to be able to reach my potential by living here. There's a lot of
Mm.
internal and external factors that were kind of barring that. And then in 2015, I actually flew out to Sydney to visit my aunt, my mom's sister, and I stayed with them over the December holidays. And I still remember, and Jeff, I often say I'm just a kid from Africa with a dream here. And I just remember walking out of Town Hall Station and kind of
Mm.
seeing the CBD for the first time. And, at that stage, I'd never traveled to Europe. It was, Australia was the biggest and baddest city I'd ever been, or Sydney City rather. And, I just remember getting goosebumps along my arm. And there was this voice. I wouldn't say, I've definitely got my own relationship with high beings or God or whatever you want to call it. But
Mm.
I felt there was a voice in my mind that was saying, Jesse, if you want to pursue your dreams, or if you want to be successful, this is the next step in your journey. And that was in 2015 that I had that, for lack of a better word, an epiphany. And that kind of ties in, making that sacrifice. I finished uni in 2017 when I was 23 years old, turning 24. And, I said goodbye to my friends and my family, who obviously
Mm.
love very much, and had been a part of that journey. And came over here in the pursuit to build a better life for myself, in the fears of being average if I stayed in South Africa.
Interesting. And that in itself has been a challenge for you, hasn't it? In terms of the
Mm.
process, you being South African, you moving over here. How does it feel now?
They say, Jeff, they say it's a 5 to 10 year process, immigration, and I've just
Mm.
hit my fifth. This will be my fifth year. And it ebbs and flows. I was really lucky. My migration lawyer actually landed up offering me a job when I first arrived in Sydney, and him and I always have a laugh with one another how one day he would love to write a book on immigration and what it's like and the journeys that people go through. But I'd say there's times where I feel comfortable, and this is at home. And on a very like simple scale, I finally feel like if I fly to visit a client, or I go to an expo, or I go on a holiday and I'm flying back in, I used to feel like, oh, I'm flying in, I'm not even coming home now. And I finally got into the point when I'm landing at Sydney Airport and getting into my apartment, I'm like, taking that deep breath out, and I'm home now. But there's still the unfamiliarities, still trying to, I always jokingly say, when I showed up here 24, 25 years old, um, people have closed their friendship applications at that stage. So it's either you're going to meet people at work, or it's very hard in, maybe in today's context or culture to like, just maybe forge relationships out and about. So I'm a social butterfly, hence why I love sales and talking to people. But
Mm.
I'd say that initial loneliness of coming over here on your own and kind of, just rocking
It's
up in a
new.
new
It's a
country.
it's a clean slate.
Exactly, and it's a good and a bad thing, right? So, it's a good thing in the sense that it's a chance to reinvent yourself for better or for worse, and you'll learn through that experience. And the bad thing, as I said, was, I, I've always looked at myself very fortunately in the sense of the relationships that I have in terms of my friends and my family. So I almost I almost used to have like this kind of cabin fever feeling where I would like, I left those people behind in a sense. And yeah, it's something that you have to deal with, but I'm also really lucky that those people that I, quote unquote left behind believe in the journey that I'm on as well. And they wouldn't have let me stay because of the way that I felt about,
Mm.
moving here and trying to start a better life here.
Why is it so long? I'm happy to say I'm ignorant of the process because so
Yeah.
I was born here, right? Why is it so long?
It's a good question, Jeff.
It seems very simple, right? But I know it's a very complex answer.
I mean, I think it's even from the context of how we like speak to one another, the sayings. Like, I still remember going to Kmart and like getting bedding, and I didn't even know what a doona was. Like in South Africa, we call
I'm
that a
still
doona.
working it out, by the way. It's all good. My wife takes care of that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's just a process of adjustment. And it's, at least one of my biggest learnings from this process was, you've obviously got to put yourself out there and to try and meet new people and, experience Sydney and explore and stuff like that. So I'd say I'd probably spent the better half of like, the first 12 to 14 months, like, trying to go to as much social things and meeting people and exploring
Mm,
that, at a stage I just got exhausted because, you're kind of
you would
putting
be.
these efforts you
Even for a social butterfly like you, right?
exactly. You're throwing lines into the universe and nothing's really coming back in.
Mm,
And I'd say that's where it gets tough, right? Is, you always, I think innately when we put effort into something, we expect to get a result out of it. And sometimes you just don't. And that's a hard reality to face sometimes. So
but if you were to approach life not expecting anything, everything's going
exactly.
to be a surprise.
100%. And so look, Jeff, I don't know what the answer is yet. And when I figure it out, I'll definitely tell you,
Mm.
and maybe my ex-boss will write a book about it one day.
Yeah, because obviously right now, just to make it very current, we have the whole job summit. There's information about migration, skilled visas, and whatnot. So I'm very curious to see how it sort of really works. So right now, the current status is PR, is that correct? Or
It's PR because I haven't had my citizenship ceremony yet. But yeah, look,
mm,
again, and I probably use the word lucky a bit too much
no, it's just who
throughout the
you are.
session.
It's an optimistic guy, which you need. You need that. So,
Yeah. So my folks applied quite some time ago to become permanent residents. Yeah. So when
mm,
maybe tying back into the story a little bit, and when I approached this lawyer to help me reenact my permanent residence visa, which had almost been dead for 2.5 years at that time. Um,
wow.
our first initial consult, and I only read the book much later on, and he similar story what I'm telling you. Went to town hall, saw Sydney City, goosebumps on the arm. This is where I need to be. I told him that same story, and he had just read the book The Alchemist, which I'm sure a lot of people
Oh,
have
very
read
powerful
that.
book.
Exactly. And he just said to me, he's like, Jess, if you get this, if we're able to get this, this is the universe throwing you a bone to go out there. So yeah, it's been interesting, but ultimately I hope once the citizenship comes and you get the piece of paper and apparently you get a little plant, I forget what tree it is. Maybe that will contribute to it a little bit, but I think
Is
very fortunate.
It's more
Yeah,
to,
sorry.
is it more to certainty? Sorry to cut you off, Jesse. I'm just trying to understand the feeling. Like I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I
is it
think
having that
certainty is
certainty?
that. Yeah, yeah. Look, I was again, my visa was like never really in question. I just had to apply for a resident return visa every year, which was, a big song and a dance, but it was very easy to do. I think certainty, which ties into familiarity, which ties into, just does it feel like home? It's hard for people, and I'm not sure, Jeff, have you done, a bit of extended travels, maybe lived in a different city or a
Oh
different
no,
town
no.
in
I've
time?
been to many places. I'm very thankful for that, but
Yeah.
never sort of long stays in a certain country. So I would
Yes.
not know.
So yeah, no, look, I'm trying to think the feeling wise, it's just I think it's that certainty and familiarity for me that,
Mm,
this is, first time I caught public transport was in 2018 when I moved here, so it's just these massive adjustments in your life. And, I think one of the things that I absolutely love about South Africa is how diverse that culture was, and, that
mm.
that whole group of people, and just coming to a different culture that has different struggles and different opinions on things. And it's just kind of figuring where you fall into the grand scheme of things and all
What's
of
been the
that.
hardest thing, if you were to pinpoint it?
I think for me personally, it was the lack of having those close bonds initially. Like I've definitely met, again, really, really fortunate through, some of the best people that I've met in the last 5 years. I'd consider them friends for life, even though we've kind of just met recently. But for me, it was just having that home base. And maybe that's the answer to your question earlier. It's just feeling like you've got that grounding, those roots are planted.
The anchor.
Um, exactly. And for me, my anchor was my friends and my family. I'm not someone,
Mm.
although the social butterfly comment probably might not help me out, but I'm not someone that wants to have a million friends, or, just have a massive social circle. If I've got 5 friends that I know that I can call up anytime, we've gone through things together, we talk on a regular basis, I'm okay with that. And it's just, finding someone that you can share that relationship with. And,
And
when
also the
you
same journey, who can understand where you came from.
exactly, yeah. And I think just having people that, just not having people that are, yes men, or that are just going to be there for the good times and that aren't there for
You
the
want
hard
someone
times.
who nudges you a bit.
Yeah, and look, I'm a deep guy, right? So I
Mm,
love getting into the weeds and talking about feelings and all of that stuff. And, people that don't really know you aren't going to be susceptible to have those conversations, at least initially. So
mm.
um I'd say that anchoring point, and just feeling like, I've got my tribe, for lack of a better word. I've got my family, my friends, the people that, if I'm having a hard day, if I'm feeling homesick, I can
You
call
want to
Jeff up. I
bounce
know he's gonna have a beer with me, or we're gonna go and have a dinner or a walk or something like
or a
that.
hug.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Just having somebody there to, as you said, share the journey and know what it's like.
I don't want to say lonely, but
Yeah.
is it maybe a bit of that? Maybe
100%. I still remember in 2018, it was, in that period of trying to go out there. I spent my 25th birthday on my own. I didn't know enough people to be like, oh, I've got to wrangle a couple of people. Let's go have a beer with, one another. So, that was obviously a tough time, but I think, maybe circling back to that conversation and being okay with who you are as a person. For
mm,
me, I feel like I needed to maybe go through some of those really quiet moments, because, when you're sitting there on your by yourself, in a sense, there's no noise and it's just you. It's just what's inside your head. What do you feel about what's going on?
you could
So
go crazy sometimes, but
I feel like I did a couple of times, definitely. But it's confronting, but in a good way. I think I'm better for it now. I don't feel that loneliness that maybe I felt in my first 2 years. And, I'd say the hardest version of loneliness is, you could be at a table of people or a table of colleagues, or, I played a lot of sport as a way to meet people
mm,
in different settings. And, I could be at a soccer game chatting to the team after the game and feel in complete isolation to everybody, and just because of how unfamiliar it is, you don't have relationships with these
different
people. But
culture, different sporting teams, something
exactly,
simple as that, eh?
exactly. So, it was tough, but I'm glad. It sounds silly, but I'm glad that I went through it, because it's definitely shaped who I am and the mindset that I take into day-to-day life now.
As they say, you need those sort of you need to be ruffled up every now and then
Yeah.
to see the polish underneath, as they say.
Yeah, no, it's and as I said, I think, for myself specifically running, I definitely, I must say, so it's not preachy, these last few years, COVID, those lockdowns 2020 and 2021, they really affected me, just, not being able to go outside and stuff. But my the way that I would kind of keep sane in these instances was running. And what I realized very young, and the way that I managed my stress of, studying a law degree, being dyslexic, and finding those challenges, is I'm someone that needs to deal with suffrage in any kind of sense to make myself more clear-minded. So, that
Interesting.
suffrage could be a 10K run. It could be a 20-minute sauna session at 80 degrees. It could be sitting on my own on my birthday, But I'm weird in that sense that I've got to have a struggle somewhat to feel some sort of sanity or clarity.
I suppose that gives you perspective in a way, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, exactly.
Wow. So it's actually quite unique. And if we circle back to this sort of your goal of trying to be happy, and it really comes down to you living your values out, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I mean, everyone kind of can throw that word around, like, what are your values? What does it mean to you? And you know, I
True. Very good
you know,
point.
you've got to figure out what that is, and then you've got to stand by them. I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got given in my life was, my first heartbreak. I was complaining to my mom about it, and she was like, "You've got to be a man, make a decision, and
Maybe a bit of a
stand by it."
slap.
Yeah, exactly. But those words ring true in my head very often, like, be a man, make a decision, and stand by it. And going back to the values, those things can't really chop and change in your life. Otherwise, there will be an uncertainty in your life. Definitely you might go through something and it might change your perspective, but at the core, you've got to have something that innately that you believe in and that drives you. Otherwise, it's very easy to get caught in this mundaneness of waking up, showering, catching the
Hmm.
bus, going to work,
You make it
doing
sound so
work.
boring.
Exactly. We got to try and get out of that narrative and just figure it
Yeah.
out.
I was going to say, I was watching a Top Gun movie, Maverick,
Yeah.
and I'm not too sure if you watched that yet,
I
Jesse.
have actually,
Okay,
yeah.
so you would know where, I don't want to ruin it, right, for people who haven't watched it, but fundamentally, the whole sort of don't think, just act.
Yes.
But
Um,
double-edged sword in a way.
yeah. I think you've got to balance those risks, right? In the
Mm.
context of that movie, don't think, just
Not everyone
act.
can be a Top Gun.
Exactly. Not everyone cuts the mustard at the end of the day. But
Mm.
if I have to think back about it, Jeff, don't think and just act. That was my immigration. The one day I just walked home, I got home and I told my mom and dad, I was like, by the time 2017 ends, I'm out of here. I wrote my final exam on the 28th of November 2017, and my immigration flight to Australia was Christmas Eve.
Mm.
So, I had such a short space, and if I failed a subject, for instance, I wouldn't, the whole plan would have just
Would have
gone.
folded.
Exactly. It would have completely backfired on me. But it was
Mm.
one of those instances where I didn't think about it and I just did it, and 5 years later, this is where we are.
But what's funny, getting to know you a bit more, even if it were to fold or even if you would hit the obstacle, given your attitude towards life and managing dyslexia, I'm sure you would have found another way around it.
I think so.
Hmm.
Look, we don't know, but I'm really happy it's it's gone down the way that it has. I think maybe another, after that breaking point that we chatted about a little bit earlier on, um, and maybe it ties into that resilience aspect is, sometimes I just don't look back and I've got those blinkers on. And it can be to the detriment of other relationships in my life, or, maybe not even exercising, for instance, and maybe just focusing on work. But I do feel that if being impulsive is not necessarily a good thing, but being impulsive with a purpose, I think, is very powerful.
Being impulsive with a purpose. Interesting.
Yeah,
That's a bit of oxymoron in a way.
it is. Yeah.
You're going to do something by impulse, yet there's a purpose.
Exactly.
So it's not really an impulse, is it?
Yeah, well, it's, you might not know what that impulse is at that particular time, but if you can
Interesting.
kind of see where you're going, it
Yeah.
does have that purpose, you know?
It seems to me that you've mapped out that, but I know early on in the conversation you mentioned about living your life to its potential, right? I think you're getting pretty close somewhat, yeah? Or
Yeah, I'd like to think so, Jeff. There's probably, I don't know, I've kind of entered the stage in my life now where I've just got a big appetite of just learning new things. I'd say even just doing something like this is probably something if you had to have asked me at the start of this year, I don't know if I would have just done something like
yeah.
this,
Just give me
randomly
all
on.
credit for keeping you comfortable, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's phenomenal hosting abilities there, Jeff. But I think there's just an innate quest for, I think I kind of, personally, and I speak to people and I see people either had a really productive good time over the lockdown period or the, pandemic.
Mm.
But for myself, and I think the way that I went about it, I feel like, if I'm being honest, I feel like I wasted 2 years essentially,
Wow.
and it was the way that, I dealt with things. There was, a couple of tough things that I had to go through during that period of time, but I feel like I'm playing a bit of catch up at this stage. So it does, I'd say the framework is there, but I'm still kind of piecing together the map and, you know, in that absence that I probably took, and maybe another thing that I learned is comfort kills, and I was very comfortable in 2020 and 2021. I just I listening back to one of your previous podcasts, one of your guests mentioned that he wanted to find a job that molded around who he was versus the opposite way around. And I came to Australia as a aspiring lawyer. That didn't work out, and I actually pursued a trade for a year and a half. And for me, that was a bit of a soul crushing journey, but I'm happy that I went through it because it really reinforced that grind. But when I fell into sales and I effectively felt that I got what I wanted in life, there was a stage where, in the first 2.5 years of Australia, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be one of these people that just don't like what they're doing. And I've like conceded to that fact. And, now I'm just like kind of going through the day to day. But when I kind of took the risk with that and was like, I love talking to people. I love interacting with people. Let me try the sales thing. Everyone kind of stumbles into sales in some weird or wonderful way. And at the same time, I think like getting everything that I wanted in a sense, and it made me comfortable, and that's where I kind of stopped doing the things that were important to me. And it was bad timing in the grand scheme of things with the pandemic and being forced at home and forced to stay at home. So as I was saying, I feel like I'm playing catch up at the moment. So it's reignited that thirst of just trying to learn more, put myself out there again. And ultimately just try and get more experiences under the belt.
What are you most forward to developing going forward?
It's a good one. Um, I think at this stage, it's time management
Time
for
management.
me.
Okay.
I you know, every year I kind of write out a list of goals. And at the start of this year, one of my goals was to figure out how to slow down time. And sometimes I sit there and I'm sure it happens with you, Jeff. If you've got a busy day, or maybe you've got some edits to do or some other work, you put your head down, and the next time you look up, it's like maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours that have gone past, and you're like, there's a million and other things that I need to do. And for myself personally, sometimes I'll get a bit carried away on other things that aren't important. So it's just being able to harness my time really effectively,
Hmm.
and just make sure that the time that I'm putting into things are super productive, because you can work on things, for instance, but sometimes I'd rather spend a good 30 minutes on something, for instance, than, sit around for an hour and a half on that thing and do what I could have done in 30 minutes and in an hour and a half, for instance. So, quite silly trying to slow down time and figure out time is what I'm up to at the moment.
And why time management? Do you want to be more productive? Do you
Yeah.
find that you want to do more throughout the day, or
That's it. It's just balancing all. Maybe better said, the reason why I want to control time a bit better is because I want to divide time very equally amongst the things that I want to do outside of work, right? Obviously, love what I do, and that's obviously going to take a lot of time. But as I said, kind of getting that physical exercise in, reading something new, or even just sitting down for I've been trying to learn how to play chess, for instance. I've never learned how to play chess. So every night or every like second night, I've got an app and I'm jumping on and I'm just trying to make the space for things that I want to do. Whereas, I maybe for my generation more so, it's very easy to like open your phone, go on Instagram and get stuck scrolling, for instance. So
mm.
it's just managing or apportioning the times to things that are going to be productive for you.
And I'm curious to sort of peel the onion a bit more in terms of
Yeah.
why do you want to be productive?
It's just to do more, essentially. It's going back to that fear of being average. There's times where I'll sit on the couch
Interesting
for
how it sort
like
of comes full circle, doesn't it?
exactly. And
Interesting.
I was actually talking to my girlfriend the other day and I struggle to commit to series. Like everyone's watching all these amazing series at the
Oh,
moment.
I
I'm
can't
like,
stand it. They take too
eh,
long.
yeah, well that's exactly my thing.
I
I'm
just
just like
fast forward.
yeah, I'm like, I don't know if I can spend 48 minutes watching this
That's how they suck
episode,
you in, these subscription
Yeah,
players. Oh, terrible, mate.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's that fear of, I've got on my wrist over here. I don't know if you can see
Yeah,
it,
yeah, I
but
can see that. Yep, yep.
I've tattooed on my wrist, work harder. And it's essentially like
Wow.
every day there's that innate ability that I could just be sitting there and I'm like, you could be doing more.
How about work smarter?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's where the time management comes in. I think, from as I was saying, from what I've been through, the work hard I can do the grind, but it's being more efficient with that time.
Interesting. And I'm curious to see when we had an early conversation, what is your definition of average?
I think it's somebody, or maybe not make it personal. I think it's going through life and accepting things for how they are or how they happen and not think that you can change it or you can become better. I'm not going to sit here and say I've been through these crazy, whirlwind stories or life-changing events or whatever, but you know, I went to like a special needs primary school, for instance, and I was around kids that had the same issues as me, and there was some people, or some of those people were confined by who they are and what they could do. Um, and I just feel like if you want to change something in your life, people get stuck, or I was stuck in a rut for quite some time after my move, and
Mm.
you are ultimately, and it sounds very cheesy, you're ultimately in control of the destiny and this journey, right? So I just think it's somebody that just, or that averageness is just kind of floating through and not really, pushing the boundaries, for instance, or going out of their comfort zone, or trying something new. It's just accepting things for, this is my reality, this is what I got to do, and this is what it is.
Interesting. That's okay, yeah. For some.
Yeah, I mean, each to their own, right? Like,
Mm.
but for me, I've just always had this incessant need of more, and it's never been from maybe a monetary or a financial context. It's just, what else can I get out of life in a sense? Like, there's more to this.
And and in terms of working out what that more is, you don't know yet, hey?
Yeah,
You're still exploring.
Exactly. And look, if we want to, we could probably sit to the whole night peeling back those layers. But
Don't worry,
I th
we got episode, I don't know, 52,
oh,
105, whatever you like. It's all good.
exactly. So look, Jeff, I'd say at the very least now it's being happy with who I am
Mm.
and what I do. Obviously what you do sometimes is very much tied to the type of person that you are. And I'm, very lucky in the sense that I've linked that quite well with the career that I've chosen at this moment.
Brilliant.
Um, But yeah, it's, when I figure out the other stages, we'll have another episode and talk about it possibly. But it's just, it's
It's
feeling
not,
more comfortable.
you're not going to feel the pressure of it. It's something that you want to achieve, but you're not
Yeah.
going to let it bog you down.
No, and it will hit you. It will hit you one
Mm,
day. You could be doing something or talking to someone, or, and it just comes in these waves. But I think for me personally, I've got to be putting myself out there each and every day, and trying to push the envelope in some sort of facet to
mm.
find what that is, right?
Hey, and that could be the next epiphany, right?
Exactly.
And you mentioned obviously right now B2B sales,
Yeah.
new position, um, time management. What about from the sales side? Anything that you're very much looking forward to in terms of developing?
Yeah, look, so I think where the starting this new role made me assess the way that I'm using my time. We very fortunate in the company that I'm at the moment, where we've got great sales enablement. As I said, we're selling intent data. So, a lot of the pitching and the selling has to do with leveraging data in a presentation, for instance. And there's so much that I can use, but it's really refining that, and obviously just navigating a new organization, right? Trying to build the relationships. If I need something, who's this person that I need to go to? And then, as we are in sales, we get measured on a quarterly basis. So there is that aspect where there's no like hurry up and wait here. It's like it's a go, go, go sort of thing.
Yeah,
And it's
you're only
like,
as good as your last number. It is what it is.
and that's the thing, it's one of my ex-colleagues who's a really good friend of mine. We often joke when we're still working together, we like, oh, I don't know how many more quarters I've got in me. We've only been and you've got to really move fast where I'm at
You're gonna
now.
pace
And
yourself.
exactly, and I like that everybody that I'm working with at the moment is phenomenally good at what they do. And from what I've seen is that the way that they manage their time is their biggest attribute, because there's so many accounts, there's so many personas within that account that we've got to connect with. As single threadedness is the quickest thing to kill a deal, essentially. So, it's just balancing that all out, but still kind of doing it in a productive way, and making sure that as salespeople every day we get out of bed and we got to kick the ball forward, right? We got to make sure that it's moving along. Otherwise, you just
It's
sometimes can't
dead.
afford, yeah, you can't afford to have a day where you actually haven't moved a stone forward in any regard, right? Um, so I'd say the starting this new role is probably the biggest driver, that time management.
Mm,
Um, and I would say secondly, you know, the the value selling is what I'm very interested in developing, and taking that to market. And obviously, I'm not afraid to fail, but at the kind of level that I'm approaching, you can't afford to do that. So it is a good balance of trying to cut your teeth at a new environment, but still execute really well. So yeah, it's I'd say the soft skills, I'm all right, but it's more those intangibles of tying a presentation and getting that value across
putting
really.
some structure to your natural talent in a way.
Exactly, yeah, harnessing it a little bit better.
Brilliant. Wow. And it's very much selling into large organizations because, like you
Exactly.
said, it's intent data. So I'm guessing that obviously the deal sizes are probably quite large, as opposed to you if you're in an SMB, where SMB probably wouldn't want some sort of data algorithm.
No, exactly. And you've said it perfectly. The deal sizes are larger, which means the expectation on delivery is greater, right? So,
You just got to hit one or two, then you're done,
yeah, and then, we go to
right?
club and put our feet up.
Have your beer.
But yeah, I love the pressure as well. And I think, I always put myself under my own sort of pressure. So, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend and one of her friends recently, and I was chatting to him about what I do. He's got an interesting job. He's a producer of a radio show in New Zealand.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And he was kind of talking to me about how his reps, or how the people at his work kind of sell advertising space. And I was kind of telling him about what a forecasting session is like, and all that. So obviously, what those are like, Jeff. So it's,
Oh, fun times, fun
yeah,
times.
it's the best time. So it's really just being able to handle the heat, when it gets hot, and just be accountable.
Yeah, it's an interesting profession, isn't it? You're very much held by your last number, but hey, it's great that you found a profession that really goes hand in hand with who you are, eh?
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, there was definitely a stage where I didn't think I was gonna find it. But again, I still remember going for, 9 interviews before I got my break, as like an SDR slash BDR at a lead generation company where it was like 250 calls a day, 3 subscriptions you had to sell in that, that kind of period. And it was obviously scary at the time, but I was just sitting there like absolutely naive. I'm like, I'm just speaking to people all day. This is what I love to do. I'm like kind of building
Crack a few
relationships with
joke,
people.
have a bit of a laugh. By the way,
Exactly.
do you want to buy this?
Exactly. And one of my other sales mentors, he actually he kind of through our relationship, he got me my first role as an account executive, which is, if you're a BDR, SDR, the kind of end goal is to break into that
Sort of,
space.
it's sort of like a nice sort of career progression. SDR,
Exactly.
BDR, AE, AM, whatever.
Exactly. And he always used to pull me aside where he'd see either I'm getting too in my own head or, stressing out. And he's like, Jess, just remember, we're not rocket scientists, we're not doctors, we're not saving people's life, we're selling software. Let's just have some fun. And there's days
Oh, wait,
where
wait, wait, wait. Don't tell a lot of people about that, mate, because it's all about software. Haven't you heard software is eating the world, or is it now AI eating the world?
Yeah, AI is a big buzzword at the moment, but
Got it. Yeah.
it's I also just try not to take myself too seriously at
Nah, you
times.
can't.
Yeah,
And you would know.
yeah, exactly. I mean, as we said, we live a quarter at a time in a sense, but you kind of putting yourself out there more than the average person does, and being able to manage the rejection as well as like the highs, it's a balance. It's a
Yeah,
it's a
and
big
you
balance.
got to have a laugh, right?
You got to laugh at the rejection sometimes too, otherwise it gets a little bit too much then.
Just make sure you don't send any sort of copy and paste outbound emails. Are
Exactly.
you also very much sort of scanning for new opportunities, Jesse, or do you have like an SDR team that supports you guys? Or
Yeah. So the current place that I'm at, we've got an SDR team, but so
hmm.
I'm in an enterprise account management space. So we look after the top 150 accounts globally. So it's cool in the sense that you just kind of working into your accounts, and because some of these corporations that we're working with, we're selling to marketing teams. So there's sometimes 20, 30, 40 people in a team that you're working with that might have multiple campaigns going on at any time. So thankfully, at least in this role, the maybe the outbound sense is reaching out to an account that maybe hasn't bought from us for a period of time. But it's luckily it's not too much of having to jump on the old LinkedIn and cold emails and cold calls and all that
Because,
sort of
like you
stuff.
said, it's very much more account management, looking
Yes.
after the big boy, as opposed to the new business team who would
Yeah.
go out.
And look, Jeff, I was an account executive for about 2.5 years, and I loved that the grind of at least I'd like to think I'm also extremely
It's not a
competitive.
grind. What are you talking about?
I'm extremely competitive in a sense where I love the fact as an account executive, you're sitting in a room and there's potentially 3 other people that you're going up against, or there's 3 other people that are given the same sort of presentation, and you got to try and
You
make
got to do
yourself
something the
stand
complete
out.
opposite of everyone else.
Exactly. And as I kind of went through those 2.5 years, I definitely found and at my previous company, if you signed on an account, you doubled as an account manager. There wasn't 2 different teams. And I really liked the more strategic working with an account and how to grow that revenue or grow the value of what they're getting. And ultimately tying back into, the thing that I love to do, probably above all else is just interact and build relationships with people. So
Mm.
very much now, I think, the first 3 years of my sales career is, as you said, the progression and learning. And, I'm very excited to see what the next possibly 2 to 3 years is like in the more account management space and the relationship forging and
Yep, yep.
building, and see how that goes.
I like it. Seems like it's sort of mapped out pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Oh.
from your side, Jeff, I know you managed, a couple of account management teams specifically.
Hmm.
Any pearls of wisdom for, someone that's kind of kicking that off now?
Pearls of wisdom, right? I think you really nailed it. Like, I think from a structural point of view of forecasting, pipeline management, and all that sort of stuff, which I think is pretty much bread and butter.
Yeah.
I think you got to have fun. You're right. I think your mentor said, you're selling software at the end of the day. You got to have some fun. And I think if you take that, I think a lot of people need to remove the pressure that comes with it. By all means, like you said, you do live a quarter of a mile or by quarterly, so to speak.
Yeah.
You got to have fun, but it is very much a cadence that you got to keep regular. So I think you pretty much nailed it in terms of keeping that cadence.
Yeah. Um, it's tricky, right? It's just
It's
figuring
tricky.
out those comms, but it's the sweet science. It's, sales is very much an intangible, but then you do get people that say that it's a very finite, particular scientific thing. And I like both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, and getting back to being true to yourself. Well, I think for me, I wasn't the best. I got to be honest, Jesse, and like what you said, right? With age, you sort of realize that I'm very much more the person who I'm a bit of a sharpshooter, as they say. I do like to connect with buyers more directly,
Yeah.
but that's the type of person I am.
Mm.
If you told me to sell the Medium podcast to you, I think I did that pretty well because you were the end buyer, right?
Yeah,
So to speak. So,
100%.
so it's very much finding your style. And if
Yeah.
the style of being an account executive or account manager or even a CSM fits your bill, right? I would say the greatest piece of advice I would give to anyone who wanted to go into sales is find a type of sales that suits you, which gets back to your previous podcast where you mentioned about finding something that aligned with you as opposed to trying to fit into
Yes.
something.
Yeah, definitely. It just saves you time ultimately, I think.
It,
You
but,
know,
it, but it takes time, right? Like I
yeah.
thought I
Ah,
was the monster enterprise new business guy who was going to go in and charm, and it wasn't me. And that's okay.
yeah. And no, that honestly, I love that you can sit here and say that because, that's it's brilliant. I think that whole key to like, being average is also being able to admit that, hey, it didn't work out, but trying something else. I
That's
actually
okay.
tried, and it didn't work out, and I try something
I
else.
think the hardest thing with anything is that you got to look yourself in the mirror
Yes.
and you got to be honest with yourself. And for me, during COVID, I know mentioned in your case where you got to be comfortable, in bit of a waste, so to speak. Those past years in COVID, looking back now, has been absolutely phenomenal for me because I really put myself into the mirror and looked myself to see what I was good
Brilliant.
at and what I wasn't, and I just took it for what it is, accepted it, and you move forward.
And Jeff, was that kind of the inception of the podcast? Was that where you like decided, hey, this is maybe something that I wanted to try?
I think I think for me, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you probably have, I'm very much someone who likes to build something.
Hmm.
Not to say, sales is a very important function for any business. I'm doing it right now in terms of bringing on new guests and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
But for me, it was very much the ability to build. And you sort of know when you feel a bit stagnant. You can sort of know when you're being a bit repetitive. And it sort of came to a point in time when how can you lead a team if you yourself don't think you're fit to build?
Hmm.
So as a leader, I had to be honest, right?
Yeah.
And there was no point me leading a team when myself wasn't in the game. So it was very much looking at myself in the mirror, seeing what suited me, and making a call.
Nice.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
it's good. And that, for lack of a better word, that reflection can be some of the scariest or a pretty
oh,
scary confrontation, right?
it was a very tough decision. But
Yeah,
actually, you know what? It wasn't a tough decision because I'm thankful when you get to with age, hopefully you get a bit wiser as well, but it also makes you realize you got to make that call, right? Like what your mom
yeah.
said, right? You got to be that person who just makes a decision. You got to go forward, and I made the call.
I feel like, just hearing you kind of talk about it and, just observing your body language there for a second, was it a bit of a freeing decision? Like once you made that decision, it kind of freed yourself a bit?
What's interesting, Jesse, is that in my farewell email, I gave an analogy. I read a very interesting book, and it basically goes that we're all lions at the end of the day, Jesse. We're meant to roam free, we're meant to prowl, but there's sort of a sense of freedom to it, right? And sometimes when you're in a salary job, it's a bit of a drug sometimes. You're in a cage, you get fed, which is a salary, but then sometimes when you look down at your paws, they come a bit more blunt.
I like that.
You know what I mean? And I looked at my paws, and I go, you know what? They became a bit blunt. And it's not to say anything negative about any past employers. They were
Mm,
fantastic. It's very much me looking at
personally.
my paws and going, you know what? Wait a second. They're getting a bit blunt. I didn't want that.
No, that's brilliant. And, obviously someone that's a bit older, I can imagine making a decision with a family and all that stuff. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but I suppose it really comes down to what you value, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, kind of sticking on that narrative of being true to who yourself, like who you are as a person. There's two questions that through my kind of time interviewing at different positions, or even just, people that I admire and I respect, I love to
Mm.
ask them these two things. So if you don't mind, I'd
Yeah,
love
go
to
for
get
it.
your
Go for it, buddy.
perspective. Um, so what would you say is your most successful failure today?
Successful failure.
Yeah.
All the startups I went to that only lasted 3, 4 months.
Wow.
It was literally a succession of failures.
Yeah.
So to be more specific, um, to give you a bit more context as well, right? I had a kidney transplant in 2010.
Wow.
So you talk about
Crazy.
sort of journeys and
Yeah.
learnings, right? But it all sort of comes together, right? So in 2014, I joined a startup in 3D technology. This was right after my honeymoon.
Wow.
And lo and behold, 3 months later, it turned out to be a scam.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you the lesson yet.
Okay.
Okay. Failed startup, 2 years back into the job after sort of recovering from kidney failure, having a transplant. It's pretty tricky when it comes to finding a job. So 5 months unemployed, went into another startup. The jockey who ran this startup is a billionaire now.
Wow.
So you figured, okay, this guy's probably got runs on the board, right?
Mm.
So if you want to place a bet on a horse race, this would have been a pretty good jockey. Now, unfortunately, I should have backed a horse instead because 4 months later, that also folded.
Wow.
So here I am trying to rebuild my life, trying to sort of, like what you said, make an impact and really achieve. Yet here we are, 1 year later, two failures, no money. What do I do next? They were the most successful failures because in that first startup that failed, which was in 3D printing, I learned so much from selling because that
Mm.
guy who orchestrated that scam was an international con man. And if you want to know how to sell, learn from a con man.
Yeah.
He
Unfortunately.
he took my selling to a whole new different level.
Well,
Okay, successful failure. The next venture, when you work for some, even though it failed, it was a SaaS company, even though it failed, I got to work with an absolute machine when it came to building businesses.
yeah,
It was a short stint, right? But wow, what an amazing experience to be working with someone who's now worth billions. Very successful failures.
yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. And honestly, I think, maybe going back to your transplant and
Mm.
um, some serious probably awards that you had gone through there, right?
It's like sort of it's hard to describe to anyone what feeling demoralized every
Yeah,
single day for 2 years feels like.
yeah.
But like you and your dyslexia and your challenge in terms of moving from South Africa to Australia, it builds your character.
Definitely. In those darkest hours and those darkest days is, it's a way to find yourself.
It
And I
does.
think the way or what you see in those times, like you obviously can learn about yourself through, just walking down the street and stumping your toe maybe. But when it's truly dark like that, I think it's where you can find that light the easiest.
It does reveal your true character.
Yeah,
And I'm very thankful that thankfully I was given a character that was
mm.
able to sort of pull through.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
you gave me the example where, about when you had the conversation, you, do you give up or you move forward? When I was in hospital bed with my arms all linked up to an IV drip and an
Mm.
ECG trying to measure my heart, it's simple, right? Do you give up or do you keep going, right?
Yeah.
And in March 2010, I made the decision to keep going.
Nice.
And that has stayed with me forever since.
And you haven't looked back, right?
Never looked back.
No, I love that you're a fighter. Um, and look, the second question that I'd love to know
Sure.
is best piece of advice you've ever been given.
Best piece of advice. Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I think I read a Buddhist book that helped me sort of. This is the first thing that comes to my head, by the way. I
Hmm.
read a Buddhist book, and it shared a very interesting story. And it goes that whenever life goes the opposite way, and it gives you an obstacle, it gives you a challenge, it very much stays with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, when it keeps staying with you and you meet people, it creates a bit of a stench.
Mm. That's good.
Interesting, isn't it? So when you keep
Very
walking
much.
around meeting people and you're trying to get sympathy, you're trying to make others feel for you, you're actually carrying that stench. And whenever
Mm.
when you keep holding it, it just gets stinkier and stinkier. And then people keep going away for some reason,
Yeah.
right? So the book goes, you know what? Why don't you take whatever life throws at you, throw it into the backyard? Whatever, just keep throwing into the backyard, throwing backyard. Keep it out of sight, right? One day, when you look back, a beautiful garden grows in the background. And that's because you left it in the backyard and you just continued on with your life.
Yeah.
And the icing on the cake sometimes is that don't expect that there will be a garden at the backyard because you can't control it.
Exactly.
There you go.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. No, thanks for that. Still on the journey. I'd love to hear what people have to say in those
Yeah.
regards. It's good feel.
Hey, great questions. I really appreciate it, Jesse. And you do know that we've been going for 1 hour and 20 minutes, right?
Really, doesn't feel like it.
Crazy, eh?
Yeah,
So it's been a great conversation, but you do know, like I said, I was going to give you a bit of a hairy question at the end, right?
yeah. Let's go for it.
So let's park everything. Let's completely go clean slate. And you mentioned slowing time, right? I think this relates quite well, right? And let's have some fun too, right?
Yeah.
Say, for example, in the near future, time travel existed. Okay, you can go back anywhere you want, but you're purely in observer mode
Yeah.
and you can't make a difference to what has happened in the past, right? Where would you go and why?
Man, you're asking a bit of a history buff. Um,
Take your
uh,
time. You can
it's a
give me
tough
top
one.
three, or think about it a bit longer and just give me one. Now, to buy some time, right?
Yeah.
Um, I have a fascination with dinosaurs.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I just want to see, dinosaurs. Sometimes you look in encyclopedia or you see documentaries, right? They look a certain
Yeah.
way, and like, do they really look like that?
Yes.
So
Yes.
for me, I'll just go back in time and see the dinosaurs.
Yeah, no, that I mean, they were effectively they were the things walking the world or the earth before we were. And sometimes I catch myself thinking, and I don't know if this is my imagination, but
Yep.
we people on a rock spinning around in this galaxy with a whole bunch of other big rocks, and it's
Lot
like,
smaller
what
than a grain of sand.
exactly, and it's like, as we were saying, on these tough days, it's like, oh, this is such a hectic day, but I look up and there's this infinity, right? And it's like, but I'm gonna give you two.
All right, give me one. Give me one.
So one, all right.
One's going to concentrate your thought. Do you want me to give you another example? What other guests have said, just to give you some more time?
Yeah, yeah. What did other
Sure.
guests say?
So a previous guest said that he wanted to go back and find his lineage.
Nice, okay.
He's also from South Africa, right?
Nice.
And I asked him, well, mate, you could be going back in time a long, long time, right? Because when you think about it, if you want to try to find your lineage, you're thinking the first in a way,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah,
And that was
100%.
his answer. But I gave him two, right? And he goes, he would love to hear Socrates speak in real life.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think for me, Jeff, parking the future aside and wanting to see, do we get to Mars? Do we
No
become
future,
this?
buddy.
And
It's all time
yeah,
machine.
so if I'm going back to any particular point in time, I would love to go back to the turn of the Industrial Revolution. Those like
Okay.
early late 1800s, 1900s, where I often my grandfather lived all the way until he was 95, and he was I guess my background is my mom's Greek, dad's Portuguese, lived in South Africa. My grandfather, he lived through World War II. Still told me a story the one day where he was playing soccer in a park and German submarines breached the harbor that was near him. Like he had just seen this unbelievable transition of technology in his lifetime. And for me, I would just love to go back and see that cultural and that technological shift that probably influences one another, the cultural and the
Mm.
technology side, and just seeing that shift and that adoption. And because we literally speaking to each other on a computer with a camera, right? Whereas back in those days you couldn't even fathom something like that. So there's probably many other times that I would want to go back to, probably
Mm.
a little bit more violent, and that's me just the history side of things. But that switch in our society where just the
It
technology
just
and
boom.
culture skyrocketed over a short period of what is nearly 200, 300 years or something like that is crazy. So for me, if you're going to narrow it down to a year, a specific time, I'd say late to early 1900s.
Fantastic. Jesse,
Yeah,
thank you for your time on joining us on the Medium podcast.
Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.